Welcome back, guys, to another exciting episode here on the channel. Today I'm basically going to be talking about how I fight my fish when it comes to fishing big swim baits. I've been getting a lot of questions, some hurtful comments on YouTube, wondering why I don't really play the fish or why I always just kind of like drag them in. So I'm basically going to go over my reasoning behind why I just try and get the fish to the boat and not play them. So if you guys are ready, let's get right to today's video. Okay, so when it comes down to fishing and swim bait fishing, you are throwing a fairly large bait, a bait that weighs anywhere from 2 ounces all the way up to like 12 ounces. These are really large baits. You got these big hooks and you got these big rods, big reels, normally a bit heavier line. Sometimes you are throwing light line, but mostly it's bigger things that you would than on a conventional setup. So like, let's just say I'm throwing a drop shot or like a Ned rig or something like that. It's going to be on lighter line. It's going to be like 15-pound braid to like a 6-pound or 8-pound like fluorocarbon leader. Like, it's really light line, stuff that can be easily breakable. With that, you're going to want to have a lighter drag. You're going to have to play the fish, because if the drag's too tight on something like that, the fish is going to dig, or it's going to do this or do that, and your line's going to break and it's going to be really, really bad. So that's for, a lot of the conventional, where you do kind of have to back off on the drag a bit and let them fight, let them play, is when you have some of that lighter line. When it comes down to swim bait fishing, I'm normally fishing anywhere from 20-pound fluoro up to 30-pound fluoro. And I've got these heavier rods with these big reels that have really good drags on them. And I'm not afraid of, if I hook a fish and the fish wants to start digging or anything like that, that the line's gonna break, or that my hooks are gonna bend out, or that my split rings are gonna bend out. So for all of my reels, my drag is set at probably 90% tight. It's not fully 100, because sometimes when you do hook some of those feistier, bigger fish, they're gonna try and run at the boat, and you want the line to give just a little bit, just because when you have a fish of that caliber and size and that power, and I've seen it multiple times before, is where a big one eats it at the boat, gives a couple head shakes, and just goes straight down. And that surge is so powerful that sometimes, even if the fish eats the bait really good and you've got great hooks, great hardware, I've literally seen them just rip the bait out of their mouths, because everything is super battened down and it just pulls the bait out of a fish's mouth. I can't really explain it, but I've seen it so many different times, and it's one of the most unfortunate things ever to happen to somebody. So that's why I kind of have a little bit looser of a drag. If it's too loose and I like miscalculated it, I'll just tighten down the drag a little bit during the fight. But for the most part, I'm trying not to touch the drag. I'm not trying to do too much of that, because then your mind falters and you think about the drag, and you're going to go to tighten the drag, and the next thing you know, the fish is up at the surface and your rod's like not low enough, and it can be just an absolute total mess, especially when it comes down to swim bait fishing. Now, with the drag thing kind of set to the side, and we know that it's not fully battened down, but it's a little backed off so they can dig, fighting the fish from when you hook it and trying to get it to the boat. So when I hook a fish and it's out there on a far cast, what I do is I immediately put my rod tip down, especially on a glide bait, because it's basically right there at the surface. And sometimes these fish are really, really smart, and they don't surge, they don't dig, they don't run or anything like that. They go straight to the surface. So when we were in Texas a few months ago, I hooked probably the biggest fish that I had hooked that entire trip on the HPH. Barely hooked, but that fish came straight to the surface. I tried to keep it down, but unfortunately the fish came off and I lost it. When you're fishing a glide bait, you want to hit it, immediately get that rod tip down, so if that fish does decide to come up and jump, you're already prepared to try and keep that fish down as much as possible. Because when you are fishing these 2 to 10, 12 ounce lures, that's so much leverage for a fish to come up and shake, because that's 4 ounces, 6 ounces going side to side, and if the fish isn't hooked that well, that momentum, that friction, and all that's happening, that bait's going to fly out of that fish's mouth and you're going to lose the fish. So you want to keep that fish down immediately after hooking it, grind, and you never want to stop reeling. Like, I see it so many times where these newer guys, what they do is they'll hook the fish and then they like do the sweeping motion and then reel down, and then like, that is not what you want to do. You do not want to sweep then reel, sweep then reel, because what happens if you sweep and the fish is running at you and you try to pick up the line, that fish can run at you. You won't be able to pick up enough line. Fish comes up, jumps, goes that way, this way, and pulls a hook. Like, I see so many dudes that are kind of getting into swim bait fishing and lose fish because they do the sweep and pull. Just hit, have your rod to the side, down, and just keep reeling. Don't stop reeling. It's the biggest thing. So that's basically about halfway back to the boat. You just keep reeling. Now, if you're by yourself, once the fish gets a little bit closer, you're gonna need to slow things down and figure out how you're gonna get the net or which side you're gonna boat flip it on. I normally fish with the net, so I get it probably about a quarter away from the boat, and I'm starting to think like, okay, I have this much line out. If I get a few more cranks, I'll have it here, and then maybe a few more cranks after that, it'll be like right where I want to net the fish. So then I go for the net, I put it up next to the front of the boat, or if I've judged it well enough, I can high stick my rod, have the net come, the fish comes up and goes right in the net peacefully. Obviously, it doesn't work out like that a lot of the times, but when it does, it feels like you're a professional netter. But a lot of times you do have to, sometimes you high stick it and there's like too much line, so you have to throw the net down, reel a little bit more, and then scoop. Sometimes you reel too much and you're having to grab the rod a little bit further up and scoop a little bit awkwardly. There's so many different ways to do it, but the most important thing is understanding the distance that the fish is at, how you're gonna net or boat flip the fish with enough line, too much line, and things like that. So that's really, really important to figure out, so you try and make the laning process as easy and as simple as possible. Now, the biggest gripe that a lot of people will leave on my videos, on my comments or whatever, is, yo, why don't you play out the fish? Like, why are you horsing that fish in? Like, I don't do this to get the thrill out of fighting a fish. If I want to go and fight a fish, I'll go out and fish saltwater, or I'll fish for stripers that are boiling. When I'm hooking up with the swimbait fish, I do not care about the fight of the fish. If the fish is big enough, it's going to give you a fight no matter what. If you hook an 8, 9, maybe even a 10 pounder plus size fish, it is going to fight you. I have hooked 5, 6, 7 pounders that fight like they're giants, and they just start digging at the boat. Like, if the fish is big enough, you're gonna get a fight. If they're normally on the smaller side, you can kind of just reel them into the boat and get them in. But the bigger, stockier, meaner fish, they will put up a fight. I've seen it thousands of times, but I'm not really there for that. I want to hit that fish. I want to get it to the boat as fast as possible. And it's a timing thing. From when I hook that fish, from when it gets to the boat and when it gets in the boat, I want to make that time as short as possible, because the more time that you're fighting that fish, and I've seen it also in conventional fishing, is the more likely the fish is going to do something that you're not expecting, and it's going to throw the bait and you're going to lose the fish. With these bigger hooks that we're using, they're going to leave a bigger hole in these fish. And the more that fish thrashes, the more that it runs, the more you pull on it, it's going to make a bigger hole in their mouths. And eventually, if that fish comes up and jumps, that hole is so big that the hook just pops out and the fish is gone. And that's just due to you fighting the fish for so long and playing with it that that hole grows bigger. The fish gets a little bit more feisty. Like, it's just so much time to fight a fish. I've seen it 1,000 times on people's Instagrams and on YouTube of losing really giant fish because they just want to play the fish. They don't have the balls to just hit it and get it to the boat as fast as possible. So for me, I will sacrifice playing and having fun and fighting the fish or whatever to just get it in the boat and say that I caught the fish. The biggest thing for me is getting the bite and then getting it in the boat. The in-between part is obviously the most sketchy and the scariest part, because on the other end of your line, you might have your personal best or an absolute trophy largemouth. I don't see why you would want to risk it to have a fight to play around with a fish. Another positive of getting the fish as fast as you can to the boat is that if you play out a fish too long, some of those older, maybe less healthy fish, they'll just die because there's a lot of these fish, they are legit fighting for their lives, right? Because they have no idea what's going on. Their survival instincts kick off, and that means that these fish are going all out to try and survive. And if you don't hook the healthiest fish or a super old fish, it could literally just not be able to recover from the energy that it spent trying to fight for 5 minutes when it didn't need to do that. Especially when you have these larger grade fish that are older and they're really nice fish. Some of these guys, what they'll do after this super long fight is they'll hold on to the fish, take a lot of pictures. They don't do the fish any justice. Like, they're just throwing it on the ground. They're like doing a bunch of crazy stuff. It doesn't help that fish to survive the overall mouth. But you get that fish, get it quick to the boat. There has been so many times where I'll hook a fish, get it to the boat as fast as I can, get it in the boat. I go down and grab it, and that thing is still super fired up. Like, that thing is pissed. Like, it's ready to go. But you put it in the live well, that thing's all fired up. It still has a lot of energy to spend. When you go back to try and take some pictures and pull it out of the live well, that fish is fighting you, biting you, it's jumping, going crazy. Like, that's what you want to see. And then when you release, the thing kicks off. And that all starts with me getting that fish to the boat as fast as I possibly can without it spending as much energy as it does have. So that's basically how I fight my fish. That's how I've been doing it for, the past 5-6+ years now. And obviously, even with all of those things, even if you hit the fish and you grind it in, you don't stop reeling, you keep your rod tip down, there are just some times that the fish will win and you're gonna lose some fish. But we're just trying to mitigate that to a lesser number of fish that we lose by these tips, by these ideas that we have in our head to try and land more and more fish. So hopefully you guys learned something from that. If not, thanks for watching anyways. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys have any other questions about landing fish or hooking fish or whatever, leave a comment down below and I'll try and get to them as much as I possibly can. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, go out there and chase your dreams.